music and the 30-second countdown clock. That's throwing me off, Ira. Welcome, everybody, into the Monday Smash, a pre-recorded edition, as tonight is Big Monday, which usually actually feels big, but today, unfortunately, Florida State tips off at 7 o'clock, and they're just as much juice as there has been in the past. He's Ira Schafel. My name is Tom Lang. This is the Monday Smash presented by State Farm Agent Reservoirs. And again, I'm staggered here, Ira. That music, I don't know that I like that as much. The other stuff felt more purposeful. It just felt like hold music, and you're waiting for State Farm Agent Russ Forrest to let you know if it was approved or not.
It was a vibe, man. It was a little jazz feel, maybe. I was waiting for some steel drum to pop in. It was, it took me to a happy place, Tom. I'm not going to lie.
Well, if you're in a happy place, we're all in a happy place here on the Monday Smash, because it's been a minute since we've convened. We're looking forward to breaking down a lot of team stuff today. It's more of this is a charcuterie board of topics today, Ira. I don't know that we've got a big meal that we're trying to eat for this edition, but a lot going on. Florida State baseball, of course, 7-0 to start the season. Big Monday, as you're going to be covering it courtside tonight, the second to last game in Leonard Hamilton's career at home as Florida State's head basketball coach. A lot of big Mondays in yesteryear where obviously they're crazy results, amazing results, atmospheres that you'll never forget. Tonight's going to be probably not on that level. It's a whiteout. But people are wondering, we could start here before we get into football, which we'll spend a lot of time on this evening. But the next head coach for Florida State, you spoke with Jeff Cameron today on the live stream at 1 o'clock, a little bit about that, Ira. But where are you hearing Florida State is in the process of naming Leonard Hamilton's successor?
Well, and real quick, just on the game itself, because some people may see this right before the game starts. They North Carolina is only favored by 2.5. They're not a great North Carolina team. They have not had a great season. They've been a bigger underachiever maybe than Florida State has, based on what you thought coming into the season. So it's a good opportunity for Florida State. And, they got the win last week against Miami. They played well down the stretch this weekend against Louisville. It would be great for Leonard Hamilton to just, get another win at home. It would be awesome. We'll see what the crowd is like, but it is cool that ESPN is going to be focused on this game. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of talk about Leonard Hamilton's tenure, which has also been cool because, as he's gone on the road last week when they went to Louisville, one of the old-time Louisville writers who's been covering college sports in that state for, decades, and remembers Leonard back being a Kentucky assistant coach, wrote a really nice piece as well. And I think we're going to see some more of that as these days tick down. But to the bigger picture for Florida State fans, you want to win these games, but they're more concerned probably everywhere I go. I think people are asking, what's going on with the search, and certainly on our message boards as well. And, I think I would describe it as they're moving quickly. It's a little John Wooden-ish. They're moving quickly, but not hurrying. I don't think Florida State's trying to name a coach right now. Report came out over the weekend that Miami is set to hire Jay Lucas. There's some disputes about whether that's going to happen. It would be early to announce that, but it came out, and it sounds very plausible. And he's a guy he's a Duke assistant coach that I think Florida State maybe was, putting some feelers out about as well. I'm not sure if they actually interviewed him or not, but he's an up and coming young assistant coach, and John Lucas' son. And so, I didn't think they would go in that direction, but his name appears to be off the board now. So you might see some movement, but you're also seeing coaches getting fired. And as we get closer to the end of the season, you're going to see more coaches getting fired. So for Michael Alford and the people who are helping him on this search, and he's not doing it alone, that's the challenge, is you're trying to figure out who you can get, who you like, who you really would like to get, and then also weighing that against other jobs are going to be coming open. And can you lock somebody in while these other jobs are open? And so the board, I think, is going to constantly change. But I think Florida State's done a lot of legwork already. This was not a surprise that Leonard Hamilton announced he was done at the end of the season. That was really the big benefit to doing what they did and letting Leonard Hamilton coach out his contract, is now you get this time, this whole year, to be assembling. I mean, if this had happened a year ago, if Leonard Hamilton had stepped down a year ago, Leonard Hamilton was super interested in Dusty May. Now, Michael Alford was really super interested in Dusty May. Dusty May ends up getting the Indiana job. I don't know if they could have ever gotten him, but that's kind of how fluid these things are. They're constantly evaluating who's out there, who they can get, and then these other jobs. There's 300-something Division I jobs, so to see what they can get. But I think they're pretty far down the road with the interviews. Again, the names we've all talked about so far, Charlton Young, Luke Laux, I think Bucky McMillan at Sanford. I think those are some of the guys who seem to be, from just talking to people around the program, those are names that they're hearing a lot. So I think those are in the mix. But then, as I said, there are some assistant coaches at big schools like Duke and other schools like that who they're interested in. And then there's probably some other mid-major coaches that might be interested in Florida State. So I think they've done a lot of work, but I don't think we're going to hear an announcement probably until maybe during the ACC tournament. I think that's best case is when Florida State's done with the ACC basketball tournament, that Florida State's in a position from an administration standpoint to announce the new coach, assuming it's not a sitting head coach. I think if it's a sitting assistant coach, I think they can make that happen. If it's a sitting head coach and they're still playing, that obviously would be tough to pull off.
Yeah, I think that's the tea leaves you would read at that point is if there is no announcement, right. I mean, it might be reported or hinted at. It could be a sitting head coach or a top assistant that they don't want distractions for their team if they're, obviously off to March Madness. But it's good to hear that answer is coming within a few weeks here. If you think about it that way, the final home game is just a couple Saturdays away, Ira. So that means that you're looking at in the next 2 to 3 weeks, Florida State could very well have their next head basketball coach, which, look, I'm sorry that this tenure is ending the way it is. Leonard Hamilton has been here since I was a student and before that. So this does feel a little bit strange. But I understand where the juice is coming from. I'm starting to get texts from casual Noles who haven't texted me, Ira, in years about basketball. And finally, they're asking the question. So who is it? Who's it going to be? Are you hearing anything? There is some untapped passion in the fan base right now that is at least paying very close attention to this hire. It's going to be a very important one in the legacy of Michael Alford and this board of trustees, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think this has been building really for the last 3 or 4 years. Leonard Hamilton, during that stretch from, 2014-ish to 2019, when it was rolling into 2020, that's a team that, again, we all think may have made a run at a national championship, finished the year number 4 in the country, got shut down due to COVID. After that, things kind of started to, unravel. And each of those next 2 years, you're thinking, okay, well, maybe bring in some new pieces, maybe get healthier. They had some injury luck that next year after the COVID season. And but I think for the last year or two, for the most part, most FSU fans were ready to move on. And so that's where we are. It's kind of, a totally different perspective, kind of like the end of Jimbo's tenure, where it wasn't necessarily that they were losing a great deal until that 2017 season, but it didn't feel like there was a lot of excitement. It didn't feel like things were going in a new direction. This is what I think Florida State basketball fans have been really eager for, to see what this is. But there's a lot of factors at play. I mean, when you ask, like, what do I think Michael Alford should do? I've been on record. I think Charlton Young would be my choice, but there are so many factors here. This is not a normal time to be hiring a men's basketball coach. Not only do you have all the upheaval with NIL and what's happening, the House settlement's coming, expected to come in a few months. We don't know for sure if it's going to happen. It's supposed to happen in April. There's, and how that affects the NIL landscape. Florida State's still suing to get out of the ACC. That may be a bigger deal in basketball than it is in football, because, a lot of college basketball coaches want to know what conference you're going to be in. This may be a very attractive job at Florida State in the ACC. It may not be as attractive if something happened, they went to the Big 12. And I don't think that's what's going to happen, but those are the things that a aspiring coach who wants to take this job has to contemplate. So that affects things. Then you go back into the money and the finances, where Florida State is so committed on football. They want to be sure that they're well positioned in football to get into a better conference. And then maybe wherever college football goes, that Florida State's well positioned there. Are they going to put the resources into men's basketball that some of these other schools are going to do? So, it's just a really fascinating time. So I think all those factors play into it. And then you got the wild cards for Florida State, where you have some coaches with NBA ties who are interested. Those guys have not traditionally done well when they've made the move to college basketball. So it's this is, when Michael Alford hired Link Jarrett, that was a no-brainer. If you could get it done, it was a no-brainer. Brooke Wyckoff made a ton of sense for a lot of reasons, women's basketball. Penske, the soccer coach, that was a huge ask to fill Mark Krikorian's shoes. You went and got a guy who'd been SEC coach of the year, had coached for a long time. You get him and he wins a national title. So they've kind of, he's really hit it at a high level in these coaching hires so far. But I don't think any hire brings as many elements and variables into the equation as this one does. And, it's the number 2 sport on campus. So there's going to be a lot of attention on it.
Oh, a ton there's a ton going on because you're right. I would agree that the conference move, if Florida State can get out of here sooner than later, it impacts all other sports and football more than it impacts football itself. It secures football, but football is going to get the funding.
Right.
Basketball could use a shot in the arm, a shot of cash, and that's where maybe some candidates might be wooed to say yes. They won't say it on the record afterwards, or in their opening press conference. But maybe your candidate pool is a little bit stronger because there's a pitch being made that, hey, our future is going to be secure here, and the resources that you're looking for are actually going to be dumped into the program. It's a fascinating time for Florida State basketball. It is a fact.
I was going to say, or the answer could be the other side of it. Listen, man, the part of it is, for people that aren't paying attention to the House settlement, the way this is going to work with revenue sharing is the conferences and then the schools are ultimately going to decide how much money of that revenue that comes in every year are you putting towards, we've heard the number $20 million, $20.2 million. How much of that are you allocating to football? How much are you allocating that to everything else? Every dollar you take away from football, is a concern for people that know that football is what drives the program. So, that's what all coaches who interview for this job are going to be asking. What's that breakdown going to be? How much are you going to allocate to men's basketball? And again, so either way, like you said, if Florida State is resolute and has a great answer there, then maybe that helps. It might limit your pool a little bit if the answer is not what they want to hear.
Yes, that non-optimistic side, that's the half I'm on right now. I'm skeptical. How much do you care? Like it's a very simple question. How much do you care about the sport at Florida State? I can understand if it's a conditional answer. Well, right now, Tom, I can't care very much because we have these other concerns. Okay. But in this moment, you can timestamp it with this hire or the candidate pool. How much does Florida State care about basketball? It's going to be fascinating to document. Later on in today's program, it's a shortened version, but we have Matt Lacerra joining us. He went down to Orlando for the second time in just a few weeks to cover the Under Armour event down there. Great coverage, 2026 elite recruits, talking about Florida State, 2027s as well, I'm sure. But we're going to get the lowdown on all that Matt learned here in just a little bit on the Monday Smash. But we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit of football here. And so, Ira, we'll start very quickly with the newcomer interviews from last week or the latest round since we've last spoke, whether it's the Desir twins or Kevin Wynn, impressive interior defensive lineman who looks the part already. Just the way he fills out an FSU polo, you say, yeah, that he might have a shot to play right away. Or Kevin Sperry, the true freshman quarterback from Texas, who's now part of Florida State's roster. It'll be part of spring camp here in the next few weeks. Any guys that stood out to you? Maybe a player I didn't mention that when you interviewed him or you heard their responses, you think that, okay, this kid it could be an interesting story here at Florida State football over the next few years.
Yeah, to me, Kevin Wynn is the guy. And anybody, if you haven't watched Kevin Wynn's interview, go watch it. And it's not necessarily what all he said. It's not like he's a big speaker, but I think he's got a really cool personality. And then, as you said, man, just that upper body speaks. I can't even. I think I asked him, dude, how much weight can you throw around in the weight room? And he's like, yeah, I can throw around a lot of weight in the weight room. I mean, he called himself country strong, which I think he is, but I also think he's weight room strong as well. That's a big dude. And, we had been hearing so much about him coming out of high school when Georgia and other schools were pushing so hard to flip him from Florida State. And he was committed for so long. And people wondered, even up until, late in the process, people wondered whether or not Florida State would be able to hold on to him. And and I think you can kind of get a sense why they were able to hold on to him. And that was part of what really got me excited isn't just the physical, which I think there are people around the program think he can help Florida State at defensive line as a freshman. I mean, he is that physically mature. And so I'm excited to see that. But then also the personality stuff, the way he talked about his family, the way he talked about his family's input into his decision. And I don't know, man, he just had a feeling like this kid came from good roots, and I'm not saying that other kids don't. And, everybody has their own situation and they handle it differently. But I was really impressed by the things he talked about with his family and the importance of them. And then, his relationship with Odell Haggins, that should not be overlooked at all. Because I asked him about Odell Haggins not being his position coach now. Now it's going to be Terrence Knighton. Odell's moving on to an associate head coach role. And you could tell, man, he's an Odell guy still, and Odell's going to be very close. He's going to be associate head coach. And so that part of it played a huge role as well. I think if Odell had retired and wasn't part of the program, I wonder if other schools might have been able to flip him. So it's I'm really excited to see him. I don't usually get too excited about interior defensive linemen as freshmen, but I think he might be one we need to watch.
When's the last one? Eddie Goldman? I mean, like Noddy was heralded, Marvin Wilson was heralded, but I don't know. For me, it was Eddie Goldman because when he stood next to Timmy Jernigan, I thought, oh my God, Timmy's already a player and this guy looks the same size. Like Wynn also has the poise to go along with it, though. I agree with you there. The presence about him, it doesn't seem like the moment is too big. No. And if you're going to break into a segment group, Ira, with a new defensive line coach, a new defensive coordinator, as a true freshman, if you're going to make that move, this would be the proper timing to kind of land that very difficult thing to achieve if you're a trench player in your first year, because you've got a fresh set of eyes on everybody.
Yeah. And, and again, I think Florida State's recruited, it's been highs and lows in terms of their defensive line recruiting the last decade. Odell Haggins' track record is off the charts. He's brought, tremendous defensive linemen through the years, great defensive tackles. The last few years, even some of these guys who we think are, guys that are going to be good contributors this year, they don't have the normal, like the raw clay to work with. And I guess clay's not raw, or maybe it always is raw, but they don't have the clay necessarily to work with that Kevin Wynn does. I love KJ Sampson, but he's a different kind of guy. I like Daniel Lyons. They're more a little bit more quickness or lankiness. They're not that dude who the first time when Kevin walked in the room, I was kind of surprised that he's not taller, because it feels like nowadays all defensive linemen are 6'3", 6'4",
right.
whatever. He's not that. But, again, I'm not trying to compare him to, but I asked him who people compare him to, and he brought up Aaron Donald. And that was kind of that's the dream scenario, obviously. But he looks like that kind of dude where he's just, or Jernigan or, the guys we've talked about. Even, Florida State's had great defensive tackles that were not built like that. But I'm excited to see what he looks like.
Well, if you're a little bit more diminutive, I'm putting that in air quotes if you're listening on the podcast, because still 6'1", 6'2" at that size is not small at all.
No.
That helps you leverage wise. I mean, yes. There's one fewer thing to overcome if you need to get lower.
Low man wins.
Low man wins. It's going to be a fascinating thing to watch. One thing I want to touch on before we sign off and I pivot to a conversation with Matt is to return to that Odell Haggins point that you made, that he is an associate head coach and that he is still involved in the program. Ira, just generally speaking, when transfer portal time came about in the offseason, he was active in that and helping assist whatever the coaches needed. Obviously, he was still involved in closing the deal with Kevin Wynn. And to your point, if he'd retired or if he was taking a golden watch, it's probably not the same scenario for Kevin where he might have been looking elsewhere. Can you speak to, as much as the associate head coach role that Odell is going to be, working in day-to-day? Because it sounds like he's going to be awfully busy.
No, I think it's going to be a big role. I honestly do. And I'm not just saying that because I like Odell or that I try to paint a big, happy picture on this. I think there's probably concerns on his part and people around the program about what that was going to mean. But I think the fact, as you just spoke to, how integral he was to the recruiting process for some of these transfers. I mean, you and I, we get to talk to Dominic Robinson a lot. So we were aware that, he was very active maybe before Gus and Mike Norvell, even before, they had their chance to call Deuce Robinson when he went in the portal. Odell was in part of those conversations as well. Like, hey man, are you going to let Deuce talk to us and making sure everything's good? And so I think that's been invaluable. The fact is he doesn't have to do that to be associate head coach. But I think, you just see the passion, which we all saw when he was interim head coach 2 times. The passion and love that Odell Haggins has for Florida State University is off the charts, is as high as anybody. Nobody's got more for sure. And I think you're going to see that in this role. And I think where he's going to help Mike Norvell a lot, assuming Mike Norvell will listen to him, is Odell understands players and what they're going through and what they're like and what they're dealing with and what they need at different times. And as a position coach, I think sometimes that gets diminished because you're so busy working on technique and you're so busy working on effort, you're so busy focusing on whether a kid went to class or all those things, those little things. Odell Haggins, to me, being a guy who could sit back. I mean, think of some of the decisions he made as head coach. He's the guy that gave the green light to Jordan Travis to play the very first time. Some decisions in terms of who made the road trip. Like I believe that when they went to Florida, one of those times as interim head coach, the walk-ons weren't traveling, and I believe he let the walk-ons travel because he thought it would be good for the team. At least the expanded role of them. So I just think he has a great feel for that stuff, and because he was a player here, he blood, sweat, and cried on those fields. I think that's going to be good for Mike Norvell, assuming he'll listen to him. And I'm not saying that he wouldn't, but as a head coach, you've got all these people coming at you, and you got all your other problems. I want to see how much he leans on Odell, because I think it would be a really good resource.
I totally agree. I mean, you could call him the director of crisis management. The guy's been the interim head coach twice. He's had to be the healer for the program at least twice, or somebody who helped keep things together behind the scenes, probably more than that over these years, Ira. He's seen a lot of things on fire at Florida State, and he's been very helpful and instrumental in helping put out those fires over the years. Yeah,
incredibly challenging circumstances. I mean, both times. Really, the first time maybe even more than the second, because when Jimbo left, I mean, it was so quick, so sudden to a lot of those players, and I think he was the only guy who could do it. He was the only guy that really calmed things down in that moment. I think he did a great job when Willie was fired as well.
Now, before we sign off for this particular part of tonight's Monday Smash, we have to talk about crisis management as it relates to the insurance industry. Why not? Why not? Russ Voorhis can help you put your mind at ease if there's a moment where you need something to help you get over the edge. It could be rental insurance. It could be homeowners insurance. It could be auto insurance. There's so much that State Farm provides. You know that from the national commercials, but how about a local face on it? Somebody you know. How about a Nole? A Nole-run organization. That's State Farm agent Russ Voorhis operation, 2 brick-and-mortar stores, Jacksonville Beach and Orange Park, but he serves, Ira, 3 key states in the Warchant multimedia footprint, and he can help a lot of Noles out there.
Yeah, really, anywhere in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, and that's, again, his offices are over there in Jacksonville, but it doesn't matter where you are in those states. He can definitely help you out. Got a great email. Russ forwarded an email. I'm not sure if he forwarded it to you or not. He forwarded a great email over the weekend from a listener and a Warchant subscriber who their insurance was coming up. They have several policies, and they just want to reach out to Russ and say, hey, what can you do for me? And Russ was really excited about that because, again, it shows the advertising dollars work, but also, he likes helping Noles, and he likes meeting Noles, and he cares about Florida. He cares about all the same things that the fans care about. And so he's just a really good guy, has a great office over there, and we recommend you check him out at russvoorhis.com.
A lot of times, Ira, folks who are as invested in these programs have the attitude of a person in an ivory tower. They're just kind of very down the middle, just watching, seeing what happens, analytical. Russ is hard on his sleeve. He's like all of us. If he's pissed off, you're going to know about it. And hopefully these are headier times for Russ and Florida State in the days ahead. Basketball program, football program. We'll be documenting that for you here on Warchant TV. Joining me in just a moment, Matt Lasser, to talk about Florida State's latest recruiting efforts. Seems like they're being more active on the trail. What did he learn in Orlando? We'll hear from him in a minute. Ira, thanks for the time as always.
Contact Russ Voorhis for an auto quote today.
As promised, here we are. Matt Lasser, staff writer, warchant.com, helping us out on the recruiting side this time because he's talking about the Under Armour event that he attended in Orlando. What was the title of this event you attended on Sunday the 23rd, Matt?
Under Armour Next Camp. Everyone knows the Under Armour All-American game at the end of every year with all the high school all-stars, I guess is the best way to say it. This is kind of where they get the invites for that game. Obviously, I'm sure they go through rankings and do their own evaluation, but they invite guys like the MVPs from each position group get invited to that game automatically from this camp. So this is think of like scouting for that game.
Okay. Makes a ton of sense. We're going to talk about a handful of players today, maybe a little bit more than a handful of players, but headliners that Florida State is in on, obviously, in the 2026 cycle. Before we do get into that, I'm sure you saw Matt, on the weekend. A couple of features from Michael Langston here on the same side of the operation, the recruiting side, where Michael's talking about Florida State getting involved a little bit more, a little bit earlier, trying to secure, for example, in June official visits, trying to land earlier visits in the month with some of the top prospects. And he spoke about that, and then also the approach of getting in earlier on kids for the next cycle. So in this case, 2026. Are you seeing that on your end? Are you hearing that from kids? Like, I just want to give you a chance to weigh in and give your thoughts on any material changes with this coaching staff versus the previous staff and how they attack recruiting.
I think you could definitely see the aggression of when they really want a kid. If they really want a kid and they want him immediately, they are pushing for them more. You saw that with Karan Maycock, right? Like, that's a guy who now he just got upgraded today to a 4-star. Finally, the film has shown that. But at the time, he was a 3-star that we were like, okay. Like, even for me, like, I interviewed him when he came on junior day a few weeks ago, and I was like, well, okay, he's a 3-star. Like, I'll put a board update on, but it's nothing story worthy. And then we watched the film, and you're like, oh wow, this kid's actually really good. And it was a kid they really liked. Obviously, a kid Tony White really likes because he's a linebacker guy. Just not someone people knew about, right? He was a safety. Everyone was recruiting him as a linebacker. And that shows that when they want someone, they're going to do all they can to get that player no matter what. And that's kind of what I've seen. Getting in on them early when it comes to official visits, yeah, it's different because we've gotten really used to seeing that last official visit weekend being the biggest, right? Last 2 years, at least the years that I've worked at Warchant, so I'm coming up on finishing year 2. Those last 2 years, the last weekend for official visits, as it normally is around the country, that's your big weekend because you want that last thought in their head as most of these kids go to commit in July, flip or whatever down the road, but most of them commit for the first time in July. So you're the last one in their head and your last one they're thinking about. And if you looked at, and I was the one who told Michael, like, hey, maybe we should look at this. Like, it's kind of interesting that you got Caden Hall and all these big guys on an earlier date. That's a little weird that they don't want them on the last date when they're probably the leader in the clubhouse, so to speak, for a lot of those guys. And if you look at the analytics side of it, they actually did better when they brought them in early last year. And it's proven over the past few years. So maybe using that, and maybe they want to set the bar rather than be the last thought.
Makes sense. I know a lot of the fan base has been calling for, man, get this done sooner, show more urgency. Doesn't mean that they're doing exactly what we all want on the outside, but it seems like there's a marriage here. There's an intersection of the ideas in front of the operation and then away from the operation. So now we get into the players that you did talk to, that you did see this weekend, led by a top 50 player in On3's recruiting rankings. And it looks like in the Big Two, we'll call, On3 and 24/7 the Big Two in terms of recruiting rankings. I know that the On3 industry ranking takes into account Rivals and ESPN. This is a top 50 consensus player in those top two. And we're talking, of course, about cornerback Chauncey Kennan out of Booker in Sarasota, Florida. This is somebody that Florida State's in on. And who else, Matt? Let us know about this kid.
So, yeah, this was a big priority going into the camp yesterday. This was priority number 1 to get to talk to and get to find out what's going on in Chauncey's or Chuck's recruitment. He first thing off the bat, when we asked him in our little group of media who was interviewing him, he goes, yeah, I'm high on Florida State and Georgia right now, which I was like, oh, okay, that's awesome. Makes my life a whole lot easier. And so, yeah, he's big on FSU and Georgia. Florida was also in there a little bit, but Will Harris leaving to Miami kind of affected that a lot. He's very close with Will Harris. So like that, Miami is another one to watch to kind of get in there, I think. So if you're going to look at 3, it's probably UGA, Florida State, and Miami. He was here on junior day. We didn't get to talk to him. And he said Tony White, Patrick Surtain, Norvell, all those guys are having good relationships with him. Another kid who's going to commit sometime in July. He's friends with Charles Lester. They're both from that Sarasota, Bradenton area, Manatee County. Yeah, he just got a lot of connections, and he likes the energy and all that kind of stuff when it comes to Florida State.
Okay, so Florida State's in on a top-flight player, and they're swinging at least in the moment against top-flight programs in the 2026 cycle. Another player.
And he's also another one that's an earlier official visit date with June 13th to 15th.
Okay, good to watch. All right, yep. So you got one in, Kennan. Now, here's the guy that I care about. You can tell that I'm starting to gear up for this because we're talking Isaiah Williams, linebacker, a big-time candidate here for Florida State to land and solidify a class that just got stronger last week with you, right? Maycock getting his 4th star in the rankings for 2026 out of Miami Central. Tell us about Isaiah Williams, what you saw from him this weekend and where Florida State stands and maybe some of the backstory of what's going on there.
Yeah, so Isaiah Williams, obviously a former Florida State commit. He decommitted after last season. Obviously, 2-10 makes sense. New staff makes sense to decommit. He's gotten close with Coach JP. He called Coach JP funny. He said they get along really well, and he said he already knew him before when he was a defensive line coach at Florida State, or defensive ends coach, really. And again, they kept going. Ernie Sims, this is a big one too with this recruitment. Ernie Sims, he said, calls him every single morning, which is always good to hear when you're going to stay on a kid like that. Again, another thing of being aggressive, getting more of that push. Other schools in here are Alabama and Florida, I think, are the two that are kind of recruiting him the hardest right now. Another one I'm a little bit worried about down the stretch will be Texas. They recently offered along with OU, I believe, last week. And he said, well, yeah, I want to look at Texas now because it's Texas. So his official visit to Florida State is considered is the last one to go against what we were saying earlier, but his is the last one. He was excited about that when we were talking to him yesterday. He was like, yeah. He literally goes, yeah, last one. And he started smiling. And we're like, are you going to change it at all? Like, you think you're going to mix it up? He goes, no, I want to keep that one as the last one. And he was kind of smiling through the whole thing. It was hard to show in the quote that he was excited about it. It seemed excited about it because they didn't really say anything, but you could tell by the facial expression, the body language, that he's really excited that Florida State is last. He's really excited that they're getting the last word. And in general, again, it just goes down to relationships. And something that sparked a lot of debate on the boards was his quote about NIL. He said NIL did not matter to him and that he wants the best coach for him, even though in the interview, we're like, what if this school offers you X amount more? And he's like, no, I still want to go to the other school if the coach is best for me.
Interesting. Well, I think just being cynical here for just a moment, if you're the number one linebacker by On3's service rankings, you don't have to worry about NIL. They're going to make room for you. They're going to make yeah.
You're going to have a good package no matter what. No, it doesn't matter where you go.
If he does recommit, if he does the whole decommit recommit thing for Florida State, you can tell that there has been a material difference in how this defensive coaching staff hits the trail and the work that they do. So we'll see if Florida State continues the momentum from the circuit right now into official visits.
And
go ahead.
And something interesting with him being decommitted, I forgot to say, we were like, is it awkward that you go back to the school that you were already committed to? Like, is it kind of like a breakup? Like, is it weird? Like, right? Like, you don't like talking to your ex-girlfriend who you were with for a little bit. He was like, no, Coach Norvell acts the exact same. Nothing's changed. He still talks to me like I'm committed.
Well, Mike is in that position where if kids want to say no and then come back, you better keep the same energy. So we'll see what happens with that recruitment and if there may be any visits to a practice between now and then. But we'll get to the next group of players. I'm going to group three together, and then you tell me what's important from each one. We're going to go with defensive back, CJ Bruna. Is it Bruna? Nebraska commit. And you can correct me in a second. Offensive tackle, Xavier Payne. That's an FSU commit. And then four-star defensive lineman, Elijah Golden. Tell me about those three players.
Yeah, so CJ, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his last name, and I didn't ask him either. So I'll just call him CJ for now. He another guy who, going in yesterday, he was a 3-star. He got upgraded today. He went all the way up from unranked to, I believe, 139th in the new On 300 rankings. Really good. He won MVP for DBs of the camp. He was really impressive. I thought he was the one who stood out the most as well when it came to that position. And obviously committed to Nebraska. Now, the interesting part about this is he did commit to Nebraska under the old defensive staff. Who has the old defensive staff now? Florida State. But I've set myself up for failure with that because he even said that probably didn't matter a whole lot. He had more of a relationship with the person they just, John Butler, I believe, that they just promoted to the defensive coordinator. So that was his guy when he committed. So Nebraska is still probably going to be in this one to the end, but he is going to go to Florida State and Clemson for a spring visit. Penn State, he said, is one of the ones also recruiting him the hardest right now. And Penn State is also that only official visit that he has scheduled right now. He has talked to Nebraska and Florida State about getting that official visit down. The dates haven't been finalized yet, but do expect that to get done soon. His relationship is with Evan Cooper, a guy who did come over from Nebraska. He even admitted he didn't know him much at Nebraska, but they have been what has made Florida State be the ones who he thinks is pushing the most, recruiting him the most, is just Evan Cooper being consistent with that communication, coming back, talking to him all the time.
Now, that makes sense to me because Evan Cooper's reputation before he was hired at Florida State or just after he was hired, you ask around, relentless on the trail. He's a junkie for this stuff, reviewing kids' high school film, their huddle, all that kind of stuff that he can review.
and then he's just dogged on the track. He will continually work. So interesting to hear that it at least is taking place with this recruitment. Xavier Payne, the offensive tackle commit, anything new? Everything ship shape with him, or anything to be concerned about?
Yeah, so this was one of the biggest questions I had going into the day of what is the status of his commitment, because we hadn't seen him yet, or hadn't seen him since he committed that day when he visited for a mini junior day back in December. He was wearing a Syracuse backpack at the camp, I will say that, and he did name Syracuse as one of the schools that were making a hard push. He said he's going to drop the dates of all of his official visits soon via graphic. I don't know through who, probably Hayes Fawcett, one with another company, I don't know, but he will be dropping the date soon. He told me the schools were Arkansas, Penn State, FSU, Syracuse, and Georgia that he's going to make the official visits. He said he's still holding strong with his commitment. He's very close with Coach Hand, obviously going back to he's an Orlando kid. Coach Hand was at UCF, so he's always been really close and loves the new app. He also said he loves the new atmosphere with Coach Norvell. But again, Syracuse, Arkansas, Penn State, Georgia, ones to watch here or to be a little worried about. He did also visit Georgia Tech in January. The thing that worries me is that you commit that early in December and he didn't come back for any of those junior days. Right. So again, just one to watch a little bit.
Okay, and Elijah Golden, this is a defensive lineman. Love the size, 6'3.5", 260 pounds. He's out of the DMV area. This is the place where Odell Haggins used to do some serious work back in the day. Defensive lineman, 6'3.5", 260. What's the latest with Golden?
So he was the defensive lineman at the camp that I had the most fun watching. That just everyone's eyes drew to him. There was Bud Elliott from another company, 247, was next to me, was like, oh, did he already go? Like that was the one that when someone walked up, they kept asking about him no matter what. And it was just really fun to watch. He didn't win MVP, but he was one of those guys that drew your eyes immediately just on size, athleticism, and all that. And he didn't have an offer from Florida State until about 2 hours ago. So, or when this airs 3 or 4. So I really like the offer. When I talked to him yesterday, it was only a 30-second interview because I went, so is Florida State, like, I know you don't have, like, do you have any contact with them at all? And he goes, no. And I was like, all right. What schools are in it for you? Florida seems like one that's really to watch as well. But again, it'll be interesting. All that can change with one offer. That we've seen that before. It doesn't really matter. If you're not in the race, I can see why a kid will be dismissive of me asking questions or anything like that. So I'm still looking to gauge what the interest level is with him now that he does have the offer. But again, this is a guy who I was really, really impressed with at the camp, just off pure athleticism and drills and in one-on-ones. I posted a clip on Twitter of him in one-on-ones and in drills as well, if you guys want to look at that.
Cannon Pickett, Reese Woodrow, Chancellor Campbell, and Chancellor Barclay. 2 chancellors? Are you kidding me? Really?
Yeah, it gets confusing, especially when you're out there looking for one, and then you're like, oh, there's Chancellor, and then and you don't want them to. They were actually together a lot, so like calling out one of their names was kind of hard to do. So Chancellor Barclay is one that Florida State offered him. He visited for the late December mini junior day. They didn't offer him then, and then Coach Hand went on the road and offered him at his school. Florida State was late in on this one, obviously with the new staff that happens, but Florida State also didn't make his summer official visit list. He said he might visit there in the spring still, and they're not completely off the table. So it's not something where they're not in the official visits list. Florida State's out. No, Florida State still has a shot at this one. We got to wait and see the spring visit goes, really. Woodrow, is that what it is? Woodrow?
Yep,
I keep getting confused.
Yep.
Yeah, I keep getting what the second part after the wood is. But Reese, he's a center. He looked really good at the camp as well. He scheduled his official visit with Florida State. He was also there for a junior day. He said he loved the energy. And again, another Orlando local guy who knows Coach Hand very well and is very close with Coach Hand. Last one, Chancellor Campbell. He currently has an official visit set up with Miami. He didn't say Florida State was one of the ones pushing the hardest currently. He said Miami, Florida, and Penn State. He did visit Florida State for a junior day later or in January. But his best relationships, he said, when I asked him that, he said, well, those are all the in-state schools, FSU, Florida, and Miami. And he thought all 3 were around the same. And he really, again, also really liked Coach Hand. They had a relationship at UCF, and he called him a really good guy. Also, he also has a OV set with Florida, and he will probably schedule that one with Florida State eventually.
Okay. Now, next up on the recruiting calendar, Florida State's going to begin hosting junior days here in the next couple of weeks. Is it the week of the 7th, 8th, and 9th of March? Is that the first Junior days, let me know what's coming up here, because obviously Florida State's spring practice schedule, which we'll get eventually, is going to be littered with visitors coming in to check out. That Mike Norvell loves to do afternoon practices in spring because he wants to welcome in kids from high schools to come take a look at the program. I'm sure there's going to be a who's who over the course of those 6 weeks. But what do you do now on the recruiting side? We'll just ask it that way. What are you looking at right now on this part of the job, this part of the calendar?
Yeah, so we're still in a dead period right now until March 3rd. So one more week-ish, and then you go into spring break. So you're not going to have a whole lot of visits until after that spring break when you get into spring practice. And yeah, you brought up the afternoon practices. I saw a Miami graphic from a coach tweeted earlier of that theirs was at like 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. or something like that. Like, yeah, good luck getting kids on a Monday at 9 a.m. So that's an advantage. Be glad we do afternoon practices, even though we'll be out there sweating in the heat, hopefully. But yeah, I wouldn't expect a whole lot. It's still a lot of hitting up kids, seeing what the visit dates are, seeing what their official visit dates are. I think we need to start focusing more on seeing who's actually going to come for spring, because the whole industry itself, we're getting ahead of ourselves because we're going, oh, look, this guy's visiting here in June and May. This guy's visiting this school in June. We still have a lot of months until June. So and all these official visits schedules can get jumbled up. A kid can commit and cancel a bunch of them. The number one player in the On3 rankings, Zion Ely, had a bunch of official visits scheduled, and he's a Maryland commit. And then last week, I believe, he just shut it all down and ended canceled all of his official visits and shut down his recruitment. So those are kinds of things you can see. Don't get too bought into these official visit lists. Get bought into the spring visits list, in my opinion.
Makes total sense. It's something we can keep an eye on here at Warchant TV, warchant.com. Head over to the site and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But if you're on YouTube, you now can subscribe to Warchant TV. It's for extra perks and bonuses. It'll always be free here to get our services at Warchant TV, at least as I understand it. But if you want the extra perks like cool badges, emojis, early access to certain videos, and then also exclusive videos to Warchant TV subscribers, not to be confused, this is going to be called a membership, actually. Warchant TV members, if you want to sign up for that, here's an informational video on how to do just that as we close out the Smash. Thank you so much, Matt, for the time. We really appreciate it.
Stop fighting the algorithm. You know you can't get enough Florida State filling your feed. Well, there's no better way to keep up with FSU on YouTube than with members-only level Warchant. It's going to get you bigger, faster, and stronger. How? Bigger.
It's hour number 2.
Join now for exclusive access to a bonus segment of the legendary Seminole headlines.
Faster.
Get debut access days in advance of the public release of the latest episode of X's and O's with Dominic Robinson, a look at the All-22 film.
Stronger.
Utilize the Member Milestone Chat, a new feature which allows your comment to be highlighted in live chats during Warchant.com shows for maximum visibility. All of this in addition to members-only flair like badges, emojis, and polls to drive the conversation of the home of the Ultimate Seminoles sports source on YouTube. Give it a try. Cancel it anytime. No commitments, no phone calls, no emails. Just a few clicks within your YouTube account. Warchant.com members only YouTube. The next level in FSU coverage on YouTube.